gentlemen.
Let's stop.
It's time.
I'm ready for this.
It's time. All right. Well, congratulations, Godless Engineer and JustJeff in the championship round for all the marbles. And Dr. Josh.
Great to be here, guys.
Dr. Josh just got off work from Foot Locker.
Yep.
So
I wish.
So I'm sure you guys saw it on the screen there, but for Dr. Josh and the debaters and everybody watching at home, this is the main event. So we have 10-minute opening arguments or statements. Then we have 10-minute cross-examinations. Then we have a 30-minute open conversation, and then 10-minute closing statements. Josh, if you'd like to talk about the cross-examination for a minute here.
Yeah, sure. So the way we run this cross is sort of like an attorney that's cross-examining a witness on the stand. So, really you're in complete control in that sense. So I'm going to make sure you stay on point, stay on topic. But, if you ask a question and they start to answer and you want to go some other direction, you can just shut it down and I'll make sure that happens. So bear that in mind.
Awesome. And so after that, we will end with a Q&A. And we'll finish the debate with that. And Mr. Smalley, is there anything you would like to say from the judge's perspective before these guys start to battle it out?
You know what, man? I have spent many years, challenging people to be critical thinkers and to examine evidence, and getting to know many, many atheists over the years. I find people who have challenged one thing and then accept something else. There are atheists who believe they can control rainbows or talk to the dead or believe in reincarnation. And so this idea that once you're an atheist, there's this whole set of things that you hold to may be generally the case, but it's not always the case. And I have met a handful of non-believers who will absolutely say, dude, Bigfoot's legit. Don't bring that into the conversation. And actually argue 100% in favor of Bigfoot and start talking about the science. I've never been a part of a discussion like this, but personally, I'm actually excited to watch it, and I'm interested and open to the evidence. So I'm really excited to find out if Bigfoot's real. Let's go.
Where's Bram when we need him, Jeff?
He's too busy working on PowerPoints and his part 12 of his 16-part essay.
Poor Bram.
All right, guys. So the topic is, does Bigfoot exist? So we have JustJeff at the affirmative. So you're going to start with your 10-minute opening statement, and they'll begin the clock when you start. So have at it.
Cool. I just want to point out the hat he's wearing. All right, let's continue. So I want to make clear here, we talk about things like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster. These are things that have been embellished as folklore, but there was still a original start to these stories. And the original start to those stories is what we're after. A Bigfoot creature, which would be something that is not currently classified as a bear or gorilla or whatever it may be. So that is what we're after. We are well aware that people have forged, in order for notoriety, Bigfoot footprints and things like that. But what I aim to give you is not these people that were hiking and saw something and took a blurry photo evidence. I'm going to give you FBI documentation about Bigfoot. I'm going to give you newspaper ran articles from the 1890s all the way through the 1920s as we did our Western expansion. And I think that my theory, as I will put it out, is that this creature was most likely annihilated by the westward expansion. And these creatures were hunted and destroyed. Therefore, we are not going to find Bigfoot today. But that folklore that we had from this creature has bled over. It is still continued because of the original events. There is still evidence that we can look at today, but we're not talking about dudes walking down a trail and seeing, something in the middle of the night or somebody fake footprinting stuff. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a creature that is not classified. Do you know how many species we discover on a yearly basis. It's something like 18,000 different species every year. So it is highly likely that we have a species that we have not been able to capture and classify yet that is known as Bigfoot. And that is the root of my argument. And I cede the rest of my time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jeff. All right, GE. You have up to 10 minutes, and clock will start as you do. And you got your classic game face on. So,
all right. So, there literally is no evidence whatsoever for Bigfoot. Every piece of evidence that has ever been put forward, even to the FBI in the FBI report that was mentioned by Jeff, have turned out to be hairs and evidence of just general creatures that we've already been able to classify. And it's true that there are like legends and folklore and everything like that dates back talking about some kind of man beast or whatnot. But in comparison, I would like to point out how if you search on YouTube right now, you can actually find a whole bunch of, I don't want to say rednecks, but a whole bunch of people going crazy over a leprechaun in a tree here in Alabama. There's also several different, animal sightings that are claimed to be part of this cryptozoology set of animals. Strange animals like I believe the New Jersey Devil's one of them, Mothman's one of them. People have these experiences, see these things. I'm guessing that most of the time this can be really just chalked up to pareidolia. Pareidolia is a trick of the mind. You think that you see some kind of pattern in something that really isn't there. And so I feel like these experiences, because they are human experiences and are inherently flawed sometimes, we think that we see things or notice things and that aren't really the truth of reality. Now, Jeff could bring up any number of pieces of evidence, which it seems like he's not going to bring up any modern pieces of evidence except for the FBI investigation into it. But it's worthy to note that the FBI investigation, all of the hairs and any physical evidence that was actually brought forward, did not, at least from my cursory review and research in the last 10 minutes, did not show that there was any unknown hairs or unclassified hairs. It all came from animals that we could readily identify. These types of creatures have been reported by people for a long time, and ultimately, I think that it just all boils down to tricks of the mind. People mistaking animals, for being these big, magical, majestic things. And I think that people have just been mistaken and have reported these fantastical sightings that have grown into folklore, but they're not actually true. I don't know if maybe a hunter was out in the woods and he thought he saw a guy, but I can guarantee you it most likely was not some kind of ape creature roaming around North America or anywhere else for that matter. All of our ape-like ancestors have died out. We are ape-like in our nature, so it kind of makes sense that we would perceive human beings to be ape-like or try to mold those two things together, even if we didn't know that we were cousins. So I think all of this can really just be explained by misidentification of either already existing animals or just tricks, just your perception of it. Maybe it was lit in a specific way where it seems like a certain thing. I recently watched, I think it's called It's not the Blue Project. It's a dramatization of this project where the FBI investigated UFOs, and they investigated these sightings that supposedly had, sightings of alien creatures, but they always found out that it was like an owl on top of a tree that looked like it was some kind of alien figure or something like that. I think that is the case here for Bigfoot, and I guess I'll cede my time.
Okay, we're not doing anything right tonight.
What if I want to be on the big screen? God damn it!
I'm used to you throwing my big fat ass up there, but
Yeah, well, you know what? Let's do it like this. Let's make it fair.
there you go.
Let's put the real star on the big screen.
I don't need to be up there.
No, you don't. Yeah, that's true.
So
how'd it go, Small?
so we're not broadcasting right now, or we are.
Yeah, we're live to the.
Oh, good.
to the-
I wanted to say something real quick. I had Survivor Man Les Stroud on my podcast like 6 years ago. And this is what we talked about. I just remembered. I should have said this in the opening, but we talked about Survivor Man, and we talked about Bigfoot. Sorry. And the way I asked him the question, I said, do you think there is a creature out there that is leaving evidence behind that we have yet to discover that we classify as Bigfoot? And he goes, David, I want to tell you right now, I really appreciate the way you asked the question. Instead of saying, the traditional example of blurry Bigfoot, he's like, that's exactly what I think is happening, is that there's this unknown creature, the undiscovered creature that is leaving this stuff behind. And we actually think that it's Bigfoot. And there is some sort of mysterious creature that we're still trying to find. So both guys have kind of touched on that. And I love that Jeff opened up with that. I don't know if I should be saying that out loud right now, but I like that he went that direction with it. And I also like Godless Engineer's viewpoint, because he offered counter examples, and that was really cool. So I've got them pretty even right now. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, how'd you feel, Pasta? What do you think?
Well, I know Bigfoot's real, so
Yes, there it is.
Well, we have a winner. We can just cut it short.
Yep. Godless, if you want to go ahead and concede there, the evidence has been proven.
yeah, man.
No, but yeah, the opening arguments, I always feel like people are. It's just like a fight, a boxing match. It's you're throwing your jabs, you're getting a feel of what you're going up against, getting a little taste of the glove. But next is the cross examinations, and this is when it starts to. This one starts to get interesting. So let's kick it back over to these fellas and let's get it on.
All right, gentlemen. So cross-examination time, 10 minutes each. So Jeff, you're going to go first. Again, I'll remind you that you are in control, Jeff, during the cross-examination. So if you want to interrupt him and cut him off, that's fine. Yeah, so I'll police that.
Sure.
So, but I do want to make sure we stay on topic. So
Sure. I have a few questions, Godless. One, are you familiar with how a speciation works, like how we discover new species?
Yeah.
So one of the things that you'll notice is that a lot of the species that are being discovered are being discovered ones that have sort of survived humanity, ones that have adapted to living with humans, adapted to living under the conditions we've set forth because of our environmental changes, things that we've done. So
I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, so in the cases of the ones we're discovering, it's because we're moving into certain areas, we're ruining their ecosystem, and we discover some things there. Deep ocean is separate. So we have deep ocean because we haven't been there. We haven't explored that yet. We're not finding those things. What I'm saying is that in the instance of a Bigfoot, as we moved westward in our pursuit, we kind of destroyed a lot of the evidence that would have been needed to specialize this specific species, which is referred to as a Bigfoot.
I think that you would need actual evidence in order to suggest that a Bigfoot actually existed at one point for humans to destroy.
So almost every Native American tribe has a very similar description of a Bigfoot character, something that is found covering. Well, actually, here I will give you an exhibit here by sharing my screen. So we can if we want to put that up. Okay, so these are some drawings that are found of a Bigfoot Sasquatch style piece. Now, this is part of a Native American written oral legends. They all speak of a primitive type creature roaming the continent's forests. In these tales, these animals are sometimes more human-like and at other times more ape-like, so we could assume it's kind of in between. Mm-hmm. And in those, they have a big, hairy, sort of ape-like creature. Now, this is something that's found common in these Native American tribes. As we pushed westward, we have people that were doing gold mining, caving, those kinds of things in the early 1900s as we were moving westward, reporting very similar sightings of these creatures. Now, in order for these creatures to survive in a world where humans exist, they would have to be almost undetectable. They would have to be smart enough to evade and or live in very remote areas, because otherwise we would have wiped them out or affected their population. So that's why you're going to have a very difficult time finding the evidence you're wanting, which is like a living sample or something like that, when it's quite clear that we may have pushed them out of existence.
Okay. Is that a question?
No, I'm just stating to what you were saying. So like, you understand that like there's multiple sources for this story. There's not just one, and they all agree upon a similar description of this beast.
Okay. I kind of feel like I covered that in my opening because, as humans are very ape-like, we have ape cousins. I think that it's very likely that confusing both apes and humans would be easy, or for somebody to mistaken a human for a large ape. So I think that the fact that there's no evidence and people have regularly mistaken things in the past for stuff like I don't know if you know this, but there's a supposed goat man that roams the United States.
Well, yeah, but just because there's other things out there that aren't true doesn't mean that our story isn't true.
Well, no, I wasn't trying to say that. I'm trying to give you the prior probability that people were just mistaken. That seems far more likely than
is there a nationwide Native American set for a goat person that shared description among large sections of space like Northern California and all the tribes there?
No, but what I've already said is that people regularly confuse things for these weird, crazy things. Humans look ape-like, so it's easy to mistake a human in the forest in the dark of the night or in whatever kind of situation as a human, or just the proclivity for humans to fall subject to pareidolia. I think that all of these things are far more likely than a Bigfoot.
Well, I also want to point out that a Bigfoot, for those that are thinking this is some sort of supernatural thing, it's not. A Bigfoot is absolutely natural. It does not need the requirements of a supernatural claim. This is not a supernatural claim. This is a natural being. Just pointing that out. So, a ape-like creature that is not currently classified. Okay, 4 minutes. So an ape-like creature that is not currently classified isn't exactly a game changer. It's not something that doesn't happen. We do discover new species all the time. You're aware that we find, like, do you debate that the 18,000 species per year that we discover?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you debate the source of 18,000 new species discovered every year?
Well, no, I don't debate that. I mean, it sounds right, but I disagree with how you understand speciation.
Well, we are finding very specific. We are finding species that were previously unknown to man at a very high rate. So there is a high likelihood that we have a species that we have not found yet.
Yes, there is, but just like me hypothesizing that there's a three-dick sloth in Madagascar, I can't say that that's real unless I have evidence for the three-dick sloth.
Well, is there a large group of people that have seen this over hundreds of years?
Maybe. I don't know.
But besides the maybe, we have a large amount of people, a large amount of Native American tribes that have seen a similar creature over a long period of time with the exact same description.
There's a lot of people in the past that have reported sightings of dragons and stuff and other magical creatures. Does that mean that they're real?
I don't know. Dragons, that's not part of the topic.
What do you think I'm sorry, this isn't my cross.
Yeah, you can get to your part. Okay. That's all I have. He can go now.
Okay. So real quick, Jeff, can you I noticed that you had a certain picture. I was wondering if you could bring up the picture that is a image of an FBI report.
Sure. I don't have control to put it on the screen, but they have it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. So that second to last sentence on that thing, can you read that for me?
It was concluded as a result of these examinations that the hairs were part of the Deor family.
Well, Deer family.
It's a Deor family.
Is it DE? Deor. Right. Yeah. So, okay.
Which is a large family. It's not a specific species.
Well, yeah, but is the Deor family, does that contain like apes?
Well, we don't know if the Bigfoot is an ape. We haven't classified it as an ape. It's just an ape-like creature in invisible looks that has been described. We don't have a sample to investigate. But this is an actual document from the FBI that was completed by Mr. Howard S. Curtis here in the Academy of Applied Science with actual hair follicles from a alleged Bigfoot.
Well,
and this is an official FBI document dated February 24th, 1977.
Okay. Well, but still, let me ask you this. Is there any physical evidence for Bigfoot?
Well, this would be an example of physical evidence, and also the pictures that I've shown are physical evidence.
Well, no. So that initial photo of the drawing on it, on the rock, honestly, if you asked me to distinguish that between that and maybe a Native American dildo, I really wouldn't have been able to tell you whether or not it was a dildo or a Bigfoot.
Well, this is quite clearly a Bigfoot, as it's.
How can you say it's quite clearly Bigfoot?
Because if you study the Native American culture and the way that they do their drawings, you can look at other examples of what they drew, like bears and people, and see how they depicted it. And clearly, you will understand it's not a dildo; it's an actual Bigfoot.
Okay.
Or an ape-like creature that is known as Bigfoot.
Okay. Well, do you also realize that ancient alien people believe that Native American drawings solidly placed dinosaurs, on the Earth at some point? Well,
I think that's a very small percentage of people that do that stuff. And you're talking about a TV show?
No, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. What matters is that ancient Native Americans drew these things on walls that seem to depict dinosaurs.
Well, seem to depict.
Well, I would also say that your Native American thing seems to depict a humanoid figure.
Sure, but we also still have their oral traditions. And it's a tale of a primitive type creature roaming the continent's forest. And in those tales, the animals were more human-like and at other times more ape-like.
Well, again, we also have similar ancient tales of dragons. Does that, and we have, oral accounts of dragons. Do you think that means that dragons exist?
Well, I do think you have to take the time into account, with the dragon mythology and Bigfoot, which is a natural thing occurring. We don't have fire breathing, like that's completely supernatural. That doesn't exist.
I don't think that, like fire breathing dragons exactly are all that supernatural. There's this one beetle that can actually acid blast a bunch of, pretty acidic stuff that feels like fire.
I think it's acid.
Well, yeah, acid, but still,
in the descriptions
it's definitely possible for it to happen, like biologically. So,
but also in the explanations of dragons, there's usually like treasure involved and all other things that clearly point to mythology.
Okay, Jeff, but we're also not talking about like the hyper sensationalized Bigfoot that's in the media. You're
Right.
talking about a very, nailed down sort of representation of them that's very bare bones and basic. So,
yeah, there's not a shroud of mythology around this, the same way there is about dragons and this conquest and what people have to gain from that, coming back and saying they slayed a dragon or whatnot. These people that are talking about the Bigfoot are talking about seeing it, being scared of it, fleeing it, and or it running away, protecting its children typically. So the tribes would have a great relationship with this by not bothering them and respecting their space. And I think that's one of the things that's changed over time is we've moved westward. We've made more noise. We may have forced this animal into the hiding, especially if they are a little bit. That's your time, so I don't want to cut you off.
Now, what do you think the chances are of an Indian, not an Indian, sorry, a Native American, like a rival Native American or something like that, dressing up in a way that seems to be a very scary humanoid, thing that scared this set of Native Americans and then wrote it down? You see, I feel like any natural explanation of that kind is going to always trump this speculation that has no evidence behind it other than these types of accounts.
Well, I think that's kind of
you don't have physical evidence is pretty damning.
I think you're kind of really, cutting them down at who they are. Native Americans weren't exactly like simple, basic people. They had a lot of deep philosophical thoughts. They had a lot of deep thoughts about how to work medicine. They found things that worked along plant species. They were scientific in that fact. So by saying that a bunch of adults would be, scared by a rival tribe, like you talk about my evidence, but do you have any evidence about this happening where people are dressing up and scaring other tribes?
Well, so let me ask you this. Whenever you're in conversations about biblical history, do you not use Bigfoot as weak evidence? Like
Me
an example
personally?
of weak? Yeah.
No, I'm using my evidence is to show that Bigfoot is much more probable than their God. And I use that because they don't believe in it. They don't believe in Bigfoot, when it is very likely that they should believe in Bigfoot because their evidence is so weak that evidence that I have for Bigfoot is so much better. It's not saying that my evidence is bad. It's saying that theirs is bad and mine is good.
Okay. All right. Well, it still doesn't change the fact that all of this physical evidence that you're talking about is either ambiguous or is not indicative of Bigfoot. All of the hair follicles and everything like that has been found has been traced back to bears and
No. It's been traced back to a species, like a larger species.
No.
Not necessarily directly
The
deer.
deer. No, the Dior in that thing was a typo. It was actually deer. So it was actually deer hair that he found. And in fact, all of the hair samples that have ever been subjected to a test as far as like Bigfoot goes, they've all been cut. They've all come back as known animals like deer, bear, everything like that. So I'm wondering, other than speculative Native American claims, ambiguous drawings on caves, bogus hair follicles being found, do you have any other?
Well, we also have miners that were working westward that report seeing these things as well as they moved westward without knowing about the Native Americans and their claims of a Bigfoot. And they saw a similar creature that was described almost identically.
Right. But I feel like it's much more likely they were just mistaken. And given that humans look very similar to apes in general, I think that they could just have been mistaken. Or there's the fact of pareidolia. People see things that their brain wants to see. They see information and a whole bunch of noise. They mistake shapes as being one shape or another. I feel like that's far more likely than an unknown ape species that's been roaming not only North America, but also in Asia, in the mountains over there in the South Pacific. Sasquatch, Bigfoot, any of that. I mean, that's all very speculative without any hard evidence to actually show that it exists. So I'm still, I guess I'm just very unimpressed with the evidence as you present it. I don't know. Is there anything that I've missed that you feel like I haven't covered in the last 15 seconds?
I don't have enough time in the 15 seconds, but we can move on to the next round.
Okay.
Oh man, I'm so glad that ass blast is now part of my vocabulary. This is, and I have to wonder, so I know Dr. Josh isn't part of this section, but I would love to know, and maybe this is for the conversation after, but with all of his credentials and degrees and experience, I have to wonder if he's ever been a part of a debate in which Native American dildos have been brought up for evidence.
No, I highly doubt it.
No, Dr. Josh, I'm guessing that's no, Dr. Josh.
Not in this type of setting. No, not formally.
It's more of a beer garden type situation.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on this right now, but being the final judge, I'm going to wait and hold my comments until the end. I'm making a lot of notes. I'm taking this seriously, and I'm going to go through some stuff at the end, but I don't think it would be fair to do it right now.
I'm looking at Jeff, and I'm thinking he knows something that we don't. He's got the mountains on his wall. He's got a Bigfoot sign behind his door. Has he met the fucking thing? Did he put
that up when this topic was decided, or has that been back there for like weeks and months?
Oh, I've been in that dungeon that he has, and it's been there.
Wow.
And Josh, before we drop you off, what would Kent Hovind have to say about this debate so far?
Well, I mean, I think this is just the sort of thing that an atheist would say. Okay, come up with something just as silly as evolution, something like Bigfoot. Okay, because that's the water raining down on the otters. Okay, I'm here to help.
Thank you, Kent Hovind.
So good. So good.
All right, and real quick shout out to again to all of our sponsors: Pasta Mike, Jim Benton, Eddie from Brute Facts, Winter Shintz, Nate Dogg, Don Folman. Thank you guys so much for making the financial part of this thing happen and throwing the $666 at the winner. So next is the open conversation. David, Pasta Mike, what are you looking for during this this open examination?
I'm just waiting to see David come in and throw both of them off the screen because I don't know who's going to win this.
I honestly feel like if I tell you what I'm looking for, that's going to give someone a game plan. And
great point.
I just think it's fair. I want to, trust me, talking is kind of what I do. I want to throw it out right now, but I just don't want to chance it. So I'm going to sit back and see what happens from here.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get them on here.
All right, gentlemen. So I don't think this will be necessary with this topic, but if I do think that you're talking past each other, I have this thing that I do where I'll ask one of you to steel man the other's position just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. But so just be aware of that. But we have an open discussion, so the floor is all yours.
Can I just say right off the bat, Jeff, I love you, man. This has been an entertaining debate. So
in 2015, I had the privilege of attending a cryptozoology debate at the Denver Museum of Science and Technology. At this debate, we had a doctor of cryptozoology, and he investigates these different things from a very scientific level. The things that they use that are most applicable to their formation are going to be taking these individual stories from not only the Native American tribes, the stories from those that were there. You got to remember, these things were talked about in the 1920s. Cameras were not easily available in the 1920s. It is quite possible, and there are claims, and we don't have pictures for these claims, that they did capture these animals. They described how much they weighed, what their fur was like, what their skin was like, all these things that are described by these guys that were doing the mining for gold in the West. They didn't have cameras to take pictures of this stuff. So we have to go based on the historical evidence that we have, which is these documents and testimonies that we have of these people. The fact that all of these testimonies line up very well. You talk about, we talk about Jesus stuff all the time. That's one, two. I mean, we have one or two stories about the death of Jesus Christ, and we got all these other interpretations of it. We have hundreds of different documents from different people, different sources. What you would expect to find to prove the Jesus claim is what I'm giving you now for Bigfoot. We have multiple substantiated claims from separate sources attesting to a similar creature that did exist. Now, whether or not that creature was able to survive in the modern times with man and the destruction of properties and all these other things, or maybe it's had to retreat to a smaller population to avoid human activity in order to survive. That is quite possible. We know that species that can avoid humans tend to live longer and better lives because we kind of fuck shit up whenever we get there. We kill species, we destroy things. So if they are able to elude us, then they're going to have a better probability of surviving. And that is why they've evolved in such a way to be so elusive.
Okay. So your main pieces of evidence is speculative, unsupported.
It's supported by multiple sources.
All right, Jeff.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
But I mean, what I mean by unsupported is that it's not supported by any like real evidence other than just anecdotal evidence from Native Americans who would have thought that it would be magical for a street light, to exist. They probably would have described that in some magical, fancy way, right? Now, I'm just kind of curious. What would be your criteria for discerning between a Bigfoot that all these people are seeing and either a pareidolia type of situation where they just mistaken something, or maybe somebody dressing up in a way that portrays like a Bigfoot thing in order to scare another person? How would you discern between the stories that we have and those instances, those explanations?
So obviously, I think we could do just a crap ton of what ifs. Like, what if it was this, or what if it was aliens deceiving, or what if it was, they were drunk and they saw something in the woods. There's so many what ifs. I don't know if we want to go down the trail of each what if, scenario. But if you have some evidence that people were dressing up and running around during that time with Native Americans and scaring one tribe or the other, or, things like that. When you look at UFOs, for example, so people have UFO, experiences or whatever that they claim, right? Now, whether or not those are real or not, I don't know, but they vary wildly in their descriptions of these alien ships, of what they're able to do, of what they see, the colors, if they're, taken to the ship, all these things. It's so wild, but we have a standardized version of Bigfoot that is shared among multiple cultures that didn't communicate with each other.
Okay.
And I just find that surprising. I know it's not going to be rock solid evidence for you of a Bigfoot existing, but it's quite clear that there was something that they were looking at that is not a bear. It's not an ape. It's not a human. It's something else. And the likelihood that we haven't found this species is high because we find species all the time. Again, 18,000 new species every year.
So again, maybe I can ask again, what is your criteria from discerning between a natural explanation for these sightings and these speculative stories and them actually them actually seeing it? Like what is going to discern for you that they were actually seeing some kind of unknown ape-like creature rather than something else? Which, by the way, the whole deer thing, that it's a deer family earlier, so there's no way that the hairs found by the FBI could ever be classified as an ape-like creature in any kind of way. But in any case, sorry, that was lingering in the back of my head there for a second. But just what is your criteria from discerning a true eyewitness testimony of this and something else happening? Doesn't matter what it is.
I do think that this meets the rules for natural explanation. I don't think it's an unnatural explanation that there is a organic humanoid.
Sorry, Jeff. I just meant like another explanation, like
Sure.
just anything else that could also explain the evidence.
Sure.
Because what you're saying is that it's more likely that they actually saw this thing than these other situations. So what criteria do you have that would swing it that way?
I understand exactly what you're asking. So I would say when you look at these stories and you actually start reading the stories from different Native American tribes and the eyewitness accounts of the people that traveled west, these people did not communicate they didn't communicate in the same language. They didn't communicate in the same stories. We didn't start studying that stuff for quite some time. They had the exact same descriptions of this thing in the same areas in different time frames. That to me points that there is something there that is causing that. Now, I understand that people do have deceptions. When I was younger, or even still sometimes, but I would go camping, and I don't know if anybody's been single person camping before. That's terrifying. If you've ever been single camping in the middle of the woods, I would go to the Cohutta Wilderness quite frequently. That's up in Tennessee. And in the middle of the night, everything sounds like a bear trying to kill you. Everything kind of runs through your head that way. But what we have here is not just in moments of stress, in moments of, nighttime or hard to see. You have people that are claiming that we're working on our railroads, people that were working on our mines on the westward expansion that saw a similar device or similar beast or creature as a group and wrote about it. And it was published in papers that we can read all the way from the late 1800s and into the early 1920s, 30s. So I think that there is a false Bigfoot account that we, like your hat, for example. I think that is a very commercialized Bigfoot tale. And that's something that is very difficult to get people to take this argument seriously because it's kind of morphed into this mythology. But a organic living species that we were unable to classify and could have possibly made extinct before we had the applicable science to study it to your satisfaction is more likely, in my opinion, than a bunch of people making it up or trying to scare themselves from one tribe to another.
Okay. Do you so I'm just trying to test your criteria here for determining that it's more likely an ape-like figure exists. And the way that I'm looking at this is that you're using anecdotal stories that have been told between people, regardless of if it was Native American or whatnot. Just seems like you're looking for independent accounts of these things, like walking around or being seen or something like that. Up in, I believe it's Minnesota. Yeah, Minnesota. Mm-hmm. There's this thing called the Wendigo. Mm-hmm. It's been, independently, attested to by several different people. Do you think the Wendigo exists?
Well, I mean, also in Minnesota, we have remains that have been found of frozen ape-like creatures that were discovered and have been studied. And those.
What did the study come out to be?
The study, actually, it was a Neanderthal type species. Which is it was found in Minnesota, and that was, let's see, I pull up the exact name of it so you can see, but they found a frozen Neanderthal-like creature frozen in the ice there, which they were able to study.
How is this related to what I asked about the Wendigo?
Well, it's obvious that there is a physical creature that was living there that meets that description. And we have physical evidence of that. So this could have been a predecessor to the American Bigfoot.
Well, okay, I didn't ask about Bigfoot. I actually asked about Wendigos.
Well,
I'm trying to apply your criteria for proving that Bigfoot is more likely to other situations that are similar to Bigfoot. One of those situations is Wendigo.
So what is
We
the
have
Wendigo?
multiple independent accounts from quite
Yeah,
close.
let me pause you guys for a second, just because. So, Jeff, do me a favor. Do our little thing.
Okay.
What I hear you saying is, what is it that you hear him saying?
What I
What
hear
is
you
his
saying
question?
is that there's a similar thing that meets the same criteria that I've already outlined that I should also accept as true if my criteria is similar or on a level playing field.
Is that what
I
you're
don't
saying?
think that you should accept it as true. I'm just trying to get a handle on like, because just hearing it from my end, a non-believer in Bigfoot, I hear what you're saying, and I get that. But then when I look at these other creatures that people supposedly have seen, and I see the exact kind, quality, and types of evidence that you're providing for Bigfoot,
Sure.
we don't accept all of these other things to exist. So why should we accept like Bigfoot to more than likely exist?
So, Jeff, I hear him asking a specific question. What question do you hear him asking?
I guess why I don't accept the testimonies for this other thing if it meets the same criteria that I've outlined for my belief in Bigfoot.
GE, is that the question you want answered?
Yeah.
Okay. Not that this is a cross-examination, but because we're staying on this, I think we should probably. Okay. Go ahead.
What is this? I'm not familiar with this Wendigo thing.
Wendigo. It's a like an 8 or 9 foot tall creature that's got the head of a deer, really long arms, and feeds on the flesh of humans.
I'm not really familiar with this thing. I see that I see some stuff on, obviously some pictures. Yeah, that looks quite terrifying.
Yeah. Also in Ohio, there's this thing called the Loveland frog. It's apparently a giant amphibious creature that walks around the Loveland area. It's got multiple independent accounts from people in the area that have seen it, and there are people that are diehard eyewitnesses that they have seen the Loveland frog.
And I think that, again, what I think you're looking at is modern Bigfoot, like your hat and my sign. These are the things that I almost like have become folklore, and that folklore has taken on a different path of mythology. What I'm talking about is when we were moving westward and learning about all these things, the Native Americans, as far as what they were talking about in all of the United States, but especially the Northwest in that area, they had very similar stories of a very acceptable, natural thing. A Bigfoot, it would not be that crazy. It wouldn't, be this spirit of, in Canada that punishes you for, I don't know. It looks terrifying. It's going to be hard to sleep tonight. Have you seen a picture of this thing?
No.
Yeah.
It's not good. It is quite terrifying. I don't know why that this is a thing. I would not show this to children.
Can I read something to you?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so this is on an informational page about the history of Wendigos. Native American versions of the creature spoke of a gigantic spirit over 15 feet tall that had once been human but had been transformed into a creature by the use of magic. Though all of the descriptions of the creature vary slightly, the Wendigo is generally said to have glowing eyes, long yellow fangs, terrible claws, and overly long tongues. Sometimes they are described as having sallow, yellowish skin, and other times depicted to be covered with matted hair. The creature is said to have a number of skills and powers, including stealth, is a near-perfect hunter, knows and uses every inch of its territory, and can control the weather through the use of its dark magic. They are also portrayed as simultaneously gluttonous and emaciated from starvation. These are Native Americans giving their account of this creature that was roaming around. I can't give you all of the tribes that talked about it, but it's definitely something that Native Americans were thinking. It's fairly obvious that this was probably like a dead deer that was somewhere or something like that, and they just mistaken it for some kind of weird flesh-eating creature.
I mean,
why should we reject this but accept Bigfoot?
well, because of the glowing eyes and all the other unnatural, supernatural things this thing would have to control of the weather was not something that Bigfoot was ever attributed with.
Well, we're not looking for a one-to-one comparison here. We're just looking for Native American accounts of it. They saw some towering 15-foot unknown creature.
Well, I think that it's not analogous because you're talking about a creature that cannot exist in the rules that we have observed in this planet. This thing cannot exist under the natural laws. When you look at the descriptions of Bigfoot from the Native Americans, it's much more animal-like, protecting of its young, things like that. It's not got glowing eyes and 15-foot tall. It's not outside of the realm of a possibility under a natural explanation.
But I'm just kind of wondering if you understand the point that I'm trying to make here.
I do. I just don't think that it's analogous because you're talking about something that can't exist.
I mean, I don't know. How can you say that it can't exist?
I mean, it's pretty clear that we don't have 15-foot high glowing spirits that control the weather. We know how weather works.
Well, yeah, we do. But like I said before, Native Americans would perceive things to be magic when they weren't magic.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
You're arguing for a Bigfoot that's distilled down to a more historical and more likely version. I'm not saying that the Native Americans, as they described the Wendigo, is correct, but this towering 15-foot tall deer-like animal, it kind of seems like maybe the Wendigo is more real than Bigfoot, considering the FBI findings as well as the other physical evidence that the FBI has in the form of hair follicles that actually map to deer. It kind of seems like some unclassified deer species that's 15 foot tall and maybe is a carnivore, roams Minnesota.
I think you can use and I'm sure, and I don't want to bring Josh into this, I'm not trying to, but when investigating a story from ancient Sumeria or Greek culture, you're going to look at things that would indicate that it is a story about mythology versus one of personal account. You can quite clearly say, by the way that you just described this thing, that it is a story of mythology, not one of actual fact. The way in which it's described, these Bigfoot encounters are not described in this way. They're described in a very naturalistic way, not this supernatural glowing eyes and all this other stuff. We know that that doesn't exist, but we do know that there are ape-like creatures because we know there's apes. We know there's human-like creatures because we know there's humans. We know that 18,000 species are discovered every year. So we don't know everything that's out in that forest, and from a natural explanation, Bigfoot still fits the bill. Doesn't need these extremely high levels of proof that you're trying to put on it because it's not a supernatural claim.
Well, I don't
much more really for a supernatural claim.
I don't really think that my level of my requirement for evidence is all that high, because I'm just looking for some actual physical evidence to support the claims of these Native Americans who were, seems to me, prone to viewing, certain natural things in a supernatural light. So it really doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility that they were just mistaken about whatever shadowy figure they saw in the forest while they were taking a shit.
There are other species of animal that we don't have pictures of that have gone extinct. And the only thing we know about them is personal testimony from people that saw them.
Oh, what else do we have that for?
Certain types of tigers and Bengals and all kinds of other cats that have been extinct. There are certain dog species, like a dingo dog mix thing with stripes. So these things existed, but we only have descriptions of them to be able to investigate because they went extinct. We don't have that. And I think what you're doing is putting modern limitations on proof for a claim that cannot be substantiated up to those standards because they didn't exist at that time.
Well, no, I'm not, because it would be quite reasonable to assume that some other different type of Bengal tiger existed at one time, just because of how evolution works and all that kind of stuff, how speciation works. It's totally reasonable. Then it's not reasonable for an ape-like creature roaming around North America far after any kind of ape-like humanoid would have been roaming around North America.
Why?
I mean, we don't find any bones that aren't or any carcasses or anything like that, any remains at all that would coincide with these big feet. We just simply don't find any kind of evidence whatsoever of them. Even, I mean, if they were so prevalent to be seen by Native American tribes all over North America, you would think that there would at least be one situation where Bigfoot remains would have been preserved in some kind of fashion. I don't know, maybe he got drunk one day and fell in a lake and got quickly buried by the cliff or something. I'm sure that if there was a substantial population, at least, and this is coming at it from population, genetics and how many organisms in a single population it takes to maintain that population over long periods of time. There would have to be a substantial number of these big feet creatures in order to survive long enough. So, given that, we should expect to find some kind of remains somewhere that would clue us into the to the idea that these big feet actually existed, rather than just speculative Native American accounts that they're apparently the only ones that are valid to attest to these big feet, and all these other creatures that they've seen, there's no way that they could have existed.
Is this the plural of Bigfoot, big feet? I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
I don't know.
I think this is important. Okay.
I think it's just Bigfoot. I don't think that there's any plural.
Please go ahead, Jeff.
It's an American word, so it could be anything. So, I mean, that's just an argument from silence that we don't have a body.
Well, no. It's not an argument from silence. We should expect to find some kind of physical evidence of Bigfoot if he were to exist, either physical remains or just some kind of indication that this population of organisms actually existed at one time in any one place. We should expect to find that kind of thing. If we don't have any evidence of that,
we do, but we do have evidence, and even people. So, like, there is a professor of anatomy and archaeology at Idaho State University in Pocatello, Jeff Meldrum, and his exact quote is, "Given the scientific evidence that I have examined, I'm convinced there's a creature out there that is yet to be identified."
Okay, I don't care what he says.
Well, I'm just saying that's what the experts say that have looked at the evidence. I just don't think that you're able to understand from the same point. If
I have experts that think the three-dick sloth in Madagascar exists, does that mean that the three-dick Madagascar sloth exists?
What evidence have they investigated?
And they've investigated all
saying that. I mean, produce that document, because we have thousands of eyewitness accounts going back centuries that are similar in description. They haven't been embellished to be this laser shooting giant 13-pound thing that controls the weather. That's not the same thing we're talking about. And I think that just adds the negative light to Bigfoot. And the only way to push my argument, let me finish. The only way to push my argument is to push it into absurdity. But a Bigfoot argument that I'm making is not about an absurd creature that's some sort of mythical beast that's 13 miles high with lasers. It's a normal, human-like, ape-like mammal with hair. It's not anything other
than. How do you
that.
know it's a mammal?
Well, because I would assume it's a mammal. I don't know. I don't think it lays eggs.
It could be a marsupial.
I honestly don't know the difference.
Marsupials carry their young like while they're still being developed, like in a pouch.
So we do have an account from one Native American tribe that describes Bigfoot as carrying its young, like under the arm, to escape from sight of the Native American tribe.
I mean, I pick up Xander and run with him all the time.
I think it's more related to ape, gorilla, possibly bear. with human attributes. It's not out of control to think about through an evolutionary standpoint that such an animal could exist. We have thousands of different species of gorillas and apes and bears. It's not outside of the realm of possibility that out of one of the 18,000 species per year, we don't know, there happens to be one that fits this Bigfoot, description.
But still, I mean, you have to understand that you're, like I said before, and I've said this a couple times, you're distilling the Bigfoot creature down from like its popularized thing. I'm doing the exact same thing with the Wendigo. I'm not saying that the thing that actually existed was a magical deer shaman that was half dead that could control the weather, right? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that these Native Americans recorded that a giant deer-like creature existed. Do you think that that is as likely as Bigfoot?
Which creature?
The Wendigo.
I don't think no. It's definitely not as likely because it's a supernatural thing.
No. You're not listening to me, Jeff. I said distill the Wendigo down to its natural attributes. A giant deer that stand. Huh?
A dead elk?
No. No, what I mean by distill it down is a giant deer that stands like on its hind legs.
Sure.
And it doesn't have glowing eyes or anything like that. But it's a giant deer that stands on its hind legs that's about 9 feet tall.
Well, what you've done is taken something that is clearly been embellished over time. And this is a great example because this Wendigo thing obviously has been embellished over time. It gives a good point to mythology. Whereas the Bigfoot character has stayed similar throughout this entire time with the centuries and centuries. It's not been embellished the same way. So I think that you have a clear differentiation there between Bigfoot and this Wendigo, which is quite clearly a mythical beast.
Well, no, the Wendigo was described by the Native Americans as I described it. So it's not been embellished over time.
No. What you're talking about is a completely supernatural beast.
Well, it was supernatural to them, but of course,
it's supernatural to us.
To undeveloped people, like to non-technological people, magic, just general technology would seem like magic, right? Just general things that we already know the explanations for would seem like magic. So the fact that they think that the thing could, control the weather and wield dark magic, I think that they were most likely mistaken in that. But given your criteria for Bigfoot, you should also consider the Wendigo in its most basic form to actually exist.
It could be. In that case, it could be something extraterrestrial. Because if it was an increasingly advanced technology to the Native Americans, they would not know what they were looking at. It'd be very difficult for them to describe it as anything other than a hodgepodge of what they do know.
So alien deer creature, extraterrestrial deer creature in Wisconsin is just as likely as Bigfoot, right?
No, I think it's less likely.
Why is it less likely?
Because it's supernatural.
Well, it wouldn't be supernatural if it's alien and it just they thought that it was magical.
Well, the laser eye thing, it sounds very supernatural. If you're looking at it from a historical standpoint, when you're researching the texts, that is going to lead you to mythology.
Well, technically,
from Bigfoot, that's not. Before that we run out of time, though, I want to make sure that it's very clear that I do have some forensic scientists that discovered the fingerprints from an alleged Bigfoot sample. And this was enough to convince a 40-year veteran forensic scientist that Bigfoot is real because these fingerprints are not of human or ape origin. And it was actually published by the National Geographic.
And Paul thought a Jew resurrected from the dead.
Yeah, but that wasn't published in the National Geographic in 19.
That doesn't really matter.
It does matter.
It's the exact same thing.
This was found in 1987 in Walla Walla, Washington. And that is what has convinced him. He said the ridge flow pattern and texture was completely different from anything I've ever seen. It certainly wasn't human and of known primate I've examined. That's evidence, the evidence that you wanted.
It's anecdotal, speculative evidence, but okay.
All right, I think we're out of time. So we can move on to closings after the break.
You guys.
I just want to go on record and say that the views that are being expressed by JustJeff are not representative of Tart or David Smalley or Austin.
No.
But they may be.
Well, maybe David.
I just
C.
want to go on
Smalley.
record and say the views of Pasta Mike do not necessarily reflect those of David C. Smalley.
That's true. That is true. Maybe I think David C. Smalley might know the term. What is the term for the group of Bigfoot? You said it in the chat earlier. I thought it was pretty good.
Bigfootses.
Bigfoot's. Yeah.
Unless one of the Bigfoot's groups contains a 3-dick Bigfoot in which everything changes.
Then what's that called?
I don't know. I ran out of shit to say.
Yeah.
Good question, though. I should have had something planned for that. I have
So,
4 pages of notes, and I'm so I did not think I would take it this seriously, but I'm glad I did, and I have so much to say.
How can nobody take this serious when Jeff is dead serious about arguing Bigfoot?
Dead serious, and he's really. Yeah, I'm ready to go. Let's go. I'm ready.
Cool.
What do we have left? What do we have left?
Well, I was getting ready to announce that. Possibly anything you wanted to?
No, just I'm enjoying this. This is actually quite fun.
Yeah, this is a blast. So everybody in the chat, thanks for hanging out. Last but not least, here are the closing statements. They'll have 10 minutes each. So, gentlemen.
Yeah, I don't think it's octopi, actually, Jeff.
It's Greek. Come on, you know Greek.
I do, but I think it's octopuses, but grammatically
It's
speaking.
octopotes.
Okay. I'll leave that up to the audience because we are now outside of my field of specialization. Okay, back to something more serious. Our closing statements for Is Bigfoot Real? So, Jeff, since you're taking the affirmative, you get to go first.
So I think what we have to look at here is it's easy to plaster this, mythical, like let's write it off. It didn't happen. This is, made up by people because of the current commercialization of Bigfoot, which, we can see here and here. That creature is not what I'm advocating for. What I'm talking about is a undiscovered species that is likely to exist deep in the forests in the northeast or northwest. Something that has been attested to for centuries without embellishment. The story has not increased to the levels of this 3-dick Madagascar thing. There's no evidence to support these. And I think he's just trying to make my argument look ridiculous. When in reality, what I am talking about is a very natural being that follows the rules that are set, the rules of logic, the rules of biology. It's not some sort of mythical thing. It is just an unclassified mammal. I'm assuming it's a mammal, unclassified mammal that exists. And we have just not had or can't find the evidence that he is looking for. But many experts that have examined evidence are convinced that Bigfoot exists. And these experts have written their stuff out. What you have to be able to do, though, and this is the difficult thing with Bigfoot, is you have to separate this fanfare TV commercialized Bigfoot image and actual documentation that you can research. So I will be honest with you, it's very difficult when looking for Bigfoot evidence to find actual documentations that show evidence that I would consider to be good evidence. There is a lot of stuff out there that is just absolutely ludicrous. So that is an understanding. I understand it. It can be very difficult. And I understand the proposition that I'm making here about a alleged creature that many believe is mythical. But what we have is something that we don't find in religion, which is thousands of eyewitness accounts, not just 2 or 5 or 500, thousands of eyewitness accounts over time, covering different places in the country over hundreds of years that meet the same description. When even you read the Gospels, we have different descriptions of the exact same event that was supposed to happen. And, we don't have any evidence for those kinds of things. That's a completely different argument. What we have here is a natural explanation, a natural beast that exists and just hasn't been discovered yet. And that's my argument.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jeff. And GE, we take it over to you.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for this very entertaining debate. I appreciate you debating me on this topic. I can tell that you've been to many conferences on this and researched for hours about this, and you seem to be pretty passionate about it, and I can respect that. But just coming from a non-believer's kind of standpoint here, the thing that gets me is that the only evidence that there is speculative anecdotal accounts by ancient peoples that also have been portrayed as drawing dinosaurs as well as big feet, and then also and then also some ancient aliens people think that there are some little miniatures that look like airplanes, and apparently that means that there's UFOs have visited us in the past. I think that in the same vein of that, you've got Native American accounts of either pareidolia events where they just mistaken something. They think they saw something, or perhaps they saw somebody else dressed up in such a fashion that would present as a giant ape-like creature. But ultimately, arguments to authority on this, I think, are going to be pretty weak, considering that we have mountains of counter evidence against big feet existing. The FBI did do an investigation into it and came away with the hair samples that were submitted were deer hair. It was deer hair. And then other physical evidence that has been supplied, you cannot actually discern whether or not it was faked or if it was real. All like footprints and all of that could definitely be faked. So there's no real criteria here to discern between fake information and real information. And so I think the best position to have until we get better evidence, whether it be physical evidence or any other kind of evidence that is more reliable than Native American anecdotal stories, to which the Native Americans also saw other things that didn't exist in nature. I think until we get better evidence than that, the better side to fall on is that there was no ape-like creature roaming around the Northwest. But the Sasquatch is known to, move around in the Smoky Mountains, which I was recently in the Smoky Mountains and I did not see a Bigfoot. So there's that evidence against it. When I argued about the Wendigo, I definitely wasn't trying to argue for the more supernatural figure of the Wendigo, just the very basic ones. The basic representation of a Wendigo being a giant deer, which there seems to be more evidence that what they saw was a deer rather than a Bigfoot. Although I would be very scared of any dildo shaped like the one that was, painted by the Native Americans. I guess if you're brave enough, anything's a dildo, right? Anyways, I just think that there's mountains of evidence against the idea of a Bigfoot existing, and there's very little or weak evidence that Bigfoot does exist. And I think I'll be done there.
Fuck you both.
Yep. And the first tournament ever here for the Ultimate Debate Championship ends with our referee saying, "Fuck you both." That's awesome. That's awesome. No, love you, Dr. Josh.
That's great.
So what the happening is? What the happens?
So do we do we bring everybody on and discuss everything that happened, or like what happens now? This is the first one, so I don't know how you guys want to roll.
Yep. Well, this is we're all virgins to this format.
Okay.
It's the first time we're doing a championship. So
Okay.
But what I thought we could do is kind of the three of us just talk a little shit here real quick. I'm going to plug those that have helped us and our sponsors one more time, and then we'll bring everybody on and we will announce the first champion.
Yeah, thank you guys for doing this. This has been really cool.
Thank you for coming on, man. You've been doing a lot with Nickelodeon lately, so we appreciate you stepping away. I know you had two table reads today.
Yeah, I did. I'm playing two characters in an upcoming animation, and I've got some other stuff that I've filmed that I can't really talk about yet, but I can hint that it involves Power Rangers somehow, and that's super exciting. And so I'm trying to keep like one foot in each world, right? Like I don't want to lose what I have going with my current podcast and the debates that I have and the discussions, but I also want people to know that I can be, I can be not that guy and still go be in a movie or a TV show or a cartoon and not bring all of that with me. So I love doing this. I love being a part of these discussions, these debates, but it is a little bit of a tricky balance, balancing Hollywood with reality. You know what I mean? There's a lot of politics there too. So
yeah, I know. I got to deal with that every day.
Yeah. So this type of thing, and I want to thank you for inviting me to do this, because this type of thing allows me to be in this world without saying things that, a big studio might use against me. So this is great. This has been really interesting. And kudos to, I don't know if they can hear me now, but both guys, I mean, damn, they're both undefeated today, right? Because of the bracket system. They've both had 4 debates now. I mean, I'm exhausted after, a 3.5 hour debate. I don't want to talk to anybody for, 4 or 5 days until I do my next show. So kudos to these guys for, going at it this long, this month. They've got to be just completely mentally exhausted. And they sure look it. I mean, they look like shit, which I love. And they're both really tired and beat up, and they're both just, troopers for doing this. So it was shockingly more entertaining and more productive and informative than I thought it was going to be. And it was more serious than I thought it was going to be. So I learned some stuff. I enjoyed it. And I've got a lot of notes to go through and talk to you guys about. But I would rather save the rest of what I'm going to say for when everybody's present and can talk back to me. So yeah,
man. Let's get them on, us.
Awesome. Welcome to the Atheist Roundtable. All right. Well, David C. Smalley, guest judge. You're the man with the decision here. So you can go through your notes, give the men what they came for.
Yeah, I declare the winner to be Dr. Josh's face. But at some point, we're just trying to break you, man. That was great, though.
Success.
Both together. Were you ever in the military?
I was 10 years.
Yeah, it shows. Yeah, that stone face, I can tell you.
Yeah.
All right, so I think rather than just telling you who I thought won and making the judgment, I kind of want to talk through it so you guys understand my approach here. And also I want to say this is a lot of pressure. I mean, because this is real money. This is $666. That's a couple of car payments for a lot of people. So I just want to say that's a lot of pressure, and I really do like both of you guys a lot. So please don't take any of this personally. From here on out, it's just business. Just know that. All right, so I'm just gonna go through my notes and give you guys my feedback real quick. I think I don't know if you guys heard me in that part of the break or not, but kudos to both of you guys for having such a long day of debating. I can only imagine how mentally exhausted you both must be after that. It's a lot, and especially taking this, not even knowing the topics when they're coming up. It's fun. This is a really cool thing, and I hope to be involved each time you guys do it. But kudos to both of you for sticking up and doing it as well as you both did. So, Jeff did a really good job of arguing for the possibility and plausibility of Bigfoot from a naturalistic perspective. And making it seem more realistic, making it more real, making it seem like not so legendary and gigantic, but some other animal that's just not yet been discovered. And the fact that we do discover thousands of species per year is, lends to that possibility and even plausibility of something like that. And John did a really good job of universally applying critical thinking, showing other creatures that have been asserted to exist by ancient natives to sort of challenge the source. Things like the laser eyes in that creature you mentioned, it could have been something to where an elk stood up on its hind legs to grab a leaf, and the moonlight was hitting his eyes a certain way and it makes it look like it's glowing. And there are all sorts of things that can build into that folklore. I will say, a lot of times Jeff was making similar arguments that I hear from Christians. Stories, things like similar stories from multiple sources. That's exactly what Christians say about Jesus. You would say things like, people have seen this Bigfoot, but we don't know that. We know that people have claimed that they have seen it. And those are the kind of conversations I have with Christians all the time. They'll say, but Jesus appeared to 500 people. And I say, no, we just know that someone wrote down that Jesus appeared to those people. The FBI document was really interesting. That was a huge factor for me because the FBI document stated that people stated it, and it did have the evidence. It did have the hair. When the hair issue came up, and it stated in there it was from the Dior family, D-E-O-R, Jeff doubled down. He said, it's the Dior family, and that's a big family. And he was convincing as hell. It sounded to me like once we got to the bottom of it and realized, and I confirmed for myself, I did go fact check that one thing. I confirmed for myself that it was in fact a typo and it was in the deer family. And I went, oh, wait a minute. Jeff is pretending to know something he doesn't know, which is a lot of what we call faith in these types of arguments, claiming to have knowledge of something you really don't not know. And then he also said, take into account the time. It seems like he was going off of a little bit of a Christian playbook here, saying that, hey, the ancient natives were very trustworthy. And then John did good combating that. Miners saw things. How do we know that the miners saw things? He even used the word testimony. We have multiple testimonies from multiple people. And he kept watering it down. And it sort of it shifted from a theistic argument to a deistic argument. Like, hey, this is just something. This is just some mammal. And it became a little bit on wobbly footing there. Christians say that we have these perfect ancient biblical texts from multiple sources, but they can't really prove it. And Jeff was saying, no, these natives caught these animals and documented it. So again, it sounds good to say it, but we only know that they claimed that it happened. And the what if spin by Jeff was really clever. When Jeff got down and started saying, well, we could play what ifs all day, because John was trying to walk him into this idea of how would you be able to differentiate? How would you be able to tell? And rather than walk into the trap, Jeff just walked around the trap and went, we can play what ifs all day, and then shifted the burden of proof. Do you have evidence that this is not true? Do you have evidence of the negative? And again, clever debate tactic, but I've seen it done a lot. Yeah, I think it just became more of a deistic argument than a theistic one. And that the actual hard evidence that was provided, the picture that was provided, looked like a key or a statue. Could have been one of the three sloth dicks, as far as we know. I'm not sure. But I don't know that it was super clear that it was evidence. It was just, again, a drawing that someone, said they saw. And then the hardest evidence that you could have provided was the FBI document. And it actually was evidence against your case because it said that it was in the deer family. So the only evidence that was actually provided was against your argument. So I love you guys both, but I have to give this win to Godless Engineer.
Oh, whoa. GE for the win.
But Godless, again, thank you so much for being a part. And you were a last minute addition. Somebody dropped out and you jumped at the chance. Here you came in here and cleaned house. So
Wow.
we appreciate it. And like I said, we'll connect. We'll get the dollars to you and we'll get the belt to you. What you got to say?
Yes, I am the master debater.
In a mass debate.
I am going to gloat, though, being the master
Hell yeah.
debater. And I think that's what I want my official title to be here on Tart. I'm the master debater, and you're going to have to fight the master debater in order to get the master debater.
Hey, don't come on here and try and start a party.
Yeah. So, anyways, I'm glad that I won. I think that what I'm probably going to do with the money is we usually donate money every single month, and I think I'm probably going to donate it to a good cause. So I'll let y'all know where that's going to go, and I guess I will see all you heathens later.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Donate to
Thanks, man.
Bigfoot research.